Hungary, like everywhere else, is a divided society. The only difference is that we have a very effective government, and a large majority of people are committed to preserving the Hungarian way of life. They kind of like the traditions of our communities, and therefore it feels very different in Hungary than almost anywhere in Europe. But of course, at the same time, you have people, particularly in Budapest, the capital city, who are influenced by Western ideals. They are very much influenced by the TV that they see from the West, the kind of messages that come out from the European Union, and and therefore it's almost like they've developed what I call a new kind of colonial mentality, where they're like the good boys and the good girls who listen to what the parents in Brussels say. And it's very sad because I like political debate, I like political argument. Nothing really wrong with that. And Hungary needs a good, healthy opposition, but it doesn't need an opposition that's just basically acting as the voice of this foreign institution based in Brussels. And so I have a lot of arguments, and sometimes they're good arguments. Sometimes people yell and shout at me and call me a fascist or call me a bad person because of my politics, but I can live with that.
Yeah, and I think they can call you or call us, because I would be on the same boat. They can call us both fascist and Soviet, which is a kind of a funny combination.
It is, yeah, and it is very funny. Sometimes on X, in the morning I get called the far right, sort of agitator, and then in the afternoon I'm called a communist, pro-Soviet agent. So, this kind of stupid criticism is the norm now. People are not able to argue intellectually or in a more sophisticated way, and therefore they rely entirely on these stupid slogans.
The other funny one that happened to me, and I would bet that it's not something. It's also something that you experience yourself. Is one day you are called Zionist, and the other day you say, I don't know, you say something that you don't agree fully with the Israeli government or about the Jewish community, and they say you are anti-Semitic, and
You got
it's
called that.
madness.
Yeah, you got called that. Although I've taken a very, very hard line on the war in Israel, because I think that uh, what's happening in Israel has got very important consequence, not just for Israel, but for the whole of the Western world. It is ultimately a civilizational war, and I take the view that whatever Israel thinks they need to do, they should do, and I never criticize them, for just very simply for the reason that I believe that they're in the right, and they have every legitimate reason for continuing with the war, and not listen to what the rest of the world tells them. Because if they just basically are told to give up and sign this peace treaty, then they basically would have given Hamas an indirect victory.
Yeah, and within Europe, I think Israel doesn't have a strong ally as Hungary. There is Hungary, then there are a good few like number two, but Hungary is for sure on the top. Do you think that's the reason, or is there any relation to the fact that the Jewish community is flourishing in Hungary?
I think Hungarians, in particular, understand that the kind of struggles that they're waging, the kind of pressures they're under, are kind of caused by the very same reasons as to why Israel is so unpopular in Western Europe. Because I think what Israel is doing is what Hungary is doing. They're both saying that their national sovereignty, their national independence, is absolutely critical. There's no compromise to be made on that score. And there is a kind of closeness that has come together. In fact, a lot of politicians in the government often joke, and they make the point that Hungary has created two nations. One is Hungary, the Hungarians, and the other one is Israel. And what they really mean by that is that many of the early Zionists, like Theodor Herzl or Max Norda, they were from Budapest. They were Hungarian Jews. that set up the state of Israel. So there's a certain bond there, and it's also the case that if you go to Budapest, it's got a very flourishing Jewish culture, Jewish community. You don't have any of that kind of outburst of anti-Semitism that you get in Berlin or in Bradford or in Paris or in Brussels. None of that is a problem in Hungary itself. And I'm really glad that Hungary and Israel have come together in this kind of very kind of positive way.
Yeah. One thing that struck me when I was in Budapest, I think, can't remember if it was Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, but we were queuing to Dohan synagogue, and there was a massive queue, I don't know, maybe 50, 70, 80 people. And the number of police were very few, maybe 2, 3, and that was enough. Like that scenario was nearly impossible in the vast majority of the continent.
It is. I mean, in London, it would be unthinkable. Brussels, that doesn't happen. It doesn't. It doesn't really happen. There is a kind of tension in the air, partially because of the presence of a large Islamist community, and partially just because there is a residue of anti-Semitic hostility that kind of prevails as a result of that. Uh, Particularly now from the left, it is very interesting how the identity political movement, whether it's Black Lives Matter, feminist, or LGBTQ or trans, have kind of joined together with Hamas and feel that they got more in common than with Israel. And there's a kind of visceral hatred for Israel that you see when you talk to some of these young pro-Palestinian, European or even American protesters.
Yeah, that is mad. But let me just stay in Hungary for a few more minutes. Do you think the battle between Hungary and Brussels is here to stay? And do you think it is? What do you think would be the outcome? Would there be a change in the Hungarian government, or they are strong enough to ensure that Fidesz has a solid future?
I think it's very difficult to predict the future. There's a lot of pressure on Hungary, and the European Union Commission is doing its best to undermine the Hungarian government. The European Commission essentially would like to see a kind of regime change occur in Hungary, a kind of uh, spring revolution or whatever they want to call it, color revolution, and it's putting a lot of pressure. You have an American ambassador in Budapest who's not behaving like a diplomat. Whenever there's an LGBTQ march, he's in the first row, and he's continually criticizing Hungary for not signing up to his California values. So there's a lot of external pressure there. And also, you have to remember that the government has been in power for 14 years, which is a very, very long time. So the government is facing a much greater challenge, both from outside and inside, than previously. It's not made any easier by the fact that the economic situation in Europe is likely to get worse next year, and means that it's going to be fairly close to the next election. So the government is going to have a very hard campaign ahead of itself if it's going to win the election. I think that it will win the election for the very simple reason that it's got a solid base of around 40% of the population will always vote for Fidesz. And even if it doesn't get a majority, I think we'll be in a position to form some kind of coalition where it's the leading power. So I think on balance, it will win, but it's not going to be anything like the previous 3 elections because there's much more forces against it, much more powerful forces being targeting it. I think also the really important thing to remember is that in the long run, Hungary, with its present government and its present policies, can only survive if there are some other countries in Europe, some big countries in Europe, that are prepared to support it. And the 2 obvious countries for that is France, in case the Ralliement National win the elections. If Le Pen wins, that would be very good for Hungary. And the other one is Italy. If if possibly Meloni will change its court. At the moment, Meloni is very pragmatic in what she does, but Hungary needs the support of at least one big European nation if it is to survive in its present form.
The other one that, sorry, have you concluded? I don't want to cut you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The other external factor that can, I believe, influence the Hungarian political future is the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. How much do you think that conflict is impacting Hungary and also the citizens and the political tensions?
It's a source of tension over the last couple of years, but I think that now that the war situation is the war situation is seeming to almost like you can gradually feel a stalemate situation coming up. I think that the war in the end will have a consequence for Hungary, which is a good one, because I think that by and large, Orban's focus on peace, the prime minister's focus on peace, is likely to pay off. I think a lot of people in Europe have very similar feelings about the war that's gone on too long. And even if you support Ukraine and you support its right to independence, you still think that somehow this war is being dragged out unnecessarily for no good reason. I think it's also the case that a lot of Europeans know that the basic policy of sanctions hasn't really worked, that the European economy is far worse as a result of this than it was before, and the Russian economy hasn't suffered that much. So I think that there is a sense in which the Hungarian government's policy, it's a very unique policy, is going to get more and more support in the year to come. And to that extent, it will actually benefit the status and the authority of the Hungarian government.
Yeah, and I think the other one that can influence the Hungarian political future is the outcome of the US election, which is due to take place, I wouldn't say in 2 weeks. I think it will take much longer for us to know the result. And then I also foresee some backlash against the outcome of the election. And you think, like, let's imagine Trump will get into the White House. That would be a strong ally. I mean, there's no stronger ally than Trump or the American. Can that boost Orban?
Without a doubt, I think that what Orban did was he made a bet, a one-way bet, that Trump will win. It was a very risky decision to take. But if Trump should win, I think that would strengthen the position of Hungary in the sense that it will be much more difficult to isolate Hungary in the way that some of the governments in Europe are trying to do. It will be much more difficult to undermine the economy of Hungary in the way that some people are trying to sort of create a lot of tensions. And the overall cultural war, international global culture war directed at Hungary will be much, much weaker than is the case at the moment. On the other hand, if Trump loses, obviously it will be not very good for Hungary because it will embolden the international global opponents of Hungary to raise the stakes.